go back and look at it again. The two seats were Georgia and Nevada that they had flipping. Laxalt defeating Cortez Masto in Nevada, and Walker defeating Warnock in Georgia. I think I might have saw that on Twitter or something, that 538 had flipped to 2, and then I went and looked this up. So maybe they've changed. That would only give the Republicans a 1-seat advantage in the Senate. That, according to 538's forecast, which I don't trust 538. Since Biden wanted to bring up violence, I guess we'll go to the news section, and we'll highlight some stories that we'll go out of order. I got 30 minutes to fill. So apparently there was indeed security footage of the Pelosi attack. The security cameras apparently weren't being monitored at the time. Here is a local news hit with the story.
Seriously injured House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul.
Yeah, sources tell ABC News Capitol Police had cameras outside the Pelosi's home last week, but no one was watching them at the time of the assault. ABC's Justin Finch reports from Washington.
New revelations days after attempted murder suspect David DePape allegedly smashed his way into House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco home, searching for her, but instead finding her husband, Paul, and allegedly bashing him.
Now, technically, he wasn't trying to murder somebody. Apparently, like, he bashed Paul in the head with a fucking hammer. But apparently, his thought process was that he was going to break Nancy Pelosi's kneecaps, so she would have to be wheeled out onto the floor of Congress, and other Democrats would see what would happen to them if they lied. That was his plan.
Him in the head with a hammer. Sources familiar with the matter telling ABC News U.S. Capitol Police had working cameras outside the Pelosi's home, but nobody was watching them at the time of the attack. Those sources adding Capitol Police later noticed local police lights on a camera, rewound the video, and spotted the break-in. The speaker was in D.C. during the assault, and apparently the cameras are not monitored 24/7 when she's out of town. ABC News also learned the speaker's home private security system, designed to notify local and Capitol Police when triggered, never sent an alert to Capitol Police. On Tuesday, 42-year-old David DePape made his first court appearance, arraigned on state charges, including attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. DePape's public defender entering a not guilty plea and promising a vigorous defense.
Now, I listened to DePape's attorney. We might hear a statement from him here in a second, but, like, he's going to blame it on right-wing propaganda that they drove him fucking to do this, and he has a point, but also the dude's got to face the consequences for his actions.
We're going to be looking into Mr. DePape, his mental state.
San Francisco prosecutors claim DePape told first responders he was on a suicide mission with plans to target Speaker Pelosi and other lawmakers.
This was not a random residential burglary. This is something that was specifically targeted. Amid concerns about political violence ahead of the midterm elections, the U.S. Capitol Police chief saying, "We believe today's political climate calls for more resources to provide additional layers of physical security for members of Congress." DePape is back in court for a bail hearing Friday. Prosecutors are arguing against his release, calling DePape a threat to the community. Justin Finch, ABC News, Washington.
This also comes as a candidate in Pennsylvania was attacked. As I said, Biden didn't mention this. This happened earlier today or last night. Apparently we got some shit-ass audio from whatever the news station is that's covering this. So you could see his hand after the attack. I'll go ahead and read the story. A Pennsylvania man running for office says he was attacked outside his Fayette County home earlier this week. Richard Ringer is on the ballot for Pennsylvania's 51st district as the House Democratic candidate. He says earlier this week, a man hit him in the head and face at least 10 times, knocking him out. Ringer was left with bruises on his face and cuts on his hand, and the assault is just the latest incident he's had to deal with in the last 3 weeks. He said he's had a message spray painted on his garage door and a brick thrown through a back window. So it would have been nice to actually get his comment.
It surprises me.
Oh, here we go.
I'm surprised this happened, but really not totally unexpected that something would happen. You know, getting close to the election day.
Another one I want to point out is that voters in Texas are saying that they are seeing intimidation due to their support of Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke. I am really having trouble talking tonight.
It's an isolated incident on one hand, but on the other hand, it's hate.
Pure hate and venom.
We sat down with Andrew and Olivia at Lakeway City Park. We're not using their real names or showing their faces or home because of their concerns over retaliation. But they wanted to show us this letter sent through the mail and addressed to them personally.
But once I found out that it only came to us, it was disturbing.
The page-long tirade begins by saying, "Thank you for showing your support for Beto O'Rourke," which they believe is a reference to the campaign signs on their lawn.
I should feel safe having that sign in my yard.
The letter goes on to dub them enemies of the state of Texas and socialists. Then it takes an even darker turn, saying, "We also now know that you don't believe in the Second Amendment and don't have a gun to protect yourself and your family, so you will not be able to protect yourselves. Don't worry, there are lots of your neighbors that do believe in the Second Amendment and will decide if they want to help you or not if there is an issue." Does that feel threatening?
Yes.
Yes.
100%. People said it wasn't a direct threat. The indirect threat, the underlying point of that is what that's there. There's a threat in
It's
that
the
letter.
implication.
It goes on to say, "I am sure the Lakeway Police Department will be happy to help someone who supports cutting their budget and who supports a candidate that wants to abolish the police and have criminals roam the streets." The author then claims, "We have given your name and address to a list of organizations that are shipping illegal immigrants to people's houses. Your house will be used as a safe house where illegals will be dropped off for you to house. Some might be drug mules or sex offenders."
I feel that they're trying to scare us away and to leave.
At the bottom, it's simply signed,
You can't tell me that the person who wrote that letter doesn't watch Ben Shapiro, doesn't watch Steven Crowder, doesn't watch Tucker Carlson every night on Fox News. I mean, that's exactly where that's coming from. Lenny, good evening, my friend. We are on early tonight. We're about 20 minutes away from the New Hampshire Senate debate. We watched the Brandon speech earlier. Not dark Brandon enough for me. It was just Brandon-y. Not dark Brandon.
your Lakeway neighbors. But Andrew and Olivia don't believe it's from anyone they know personally.
We talk to our neighbors who have different political beliefs, and we hang out all the time. It's never an issue. But for this person, it became an issue.
The question of whether or not this is an example of voter intimidation is an interesting one.
Constitutional law professor Eddie Carter says while this action may not legally qualify as intimidation because it happened away from a polling place,
certainly, the spirit of the letter and the character of the letter, the wording, the phraseology, and the sentences and the intent behind the letter is aimed at intimidation. It infringes upon the very intent behind.
Thank you for being a freaking follower.
This couple has lived here in Lakeway for the last 20 years, and they say they have had things happen to them in years past, like campaign signs being ripped off their front lawn, but never anything quite like this. This feels different.
This feels a lot different. It's escalated.
Andrew and Olivia believe last week's attack on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband goes to show that hateful words can lead to a dangerous place.
I'm not going to say fear because I don't want fear to take over, but I'm alert.
They say they've installed security cameras at their home, but the idea of taking their signs down never crossed their mind.
Not once.
If something like this happened to a supporter of Governor Abbott, would you feel the same way about it?
Absolutely, 100%. This is not a political party issue by any means. This is an issue of people feeling that it's okay to spew such negative.
No, I do believe it's a political party issue because one party isn't getting up there and just demonizing the other party all the time. Like, let me tell you the amount of people who have called me groomer and pedophile on my own videos on YouTube. Simply because I point out that the drag queen that they accused of being naked is wearing skin-colored tights and their ass isn't hanging out. These people are fucking crazy. Even Rush fucking Limbaugh called it.
As a conservative, it's getting harder and harder to not look like a kook.
We'll see how we're feeling at the end of the show after the debate. We might watch the Rush Limbaugh's wife. We'll have to guess which wife it is. I assume it was his last one, but it could have been, one of the other two. But then again, I think they died of cancer when Rush divorced him. But I might be thinking of Newt Gingrich. I get all these fucking womanizing white sacks of shit confused. Pretty sure both of them cheated on their wives when they had cancer. Or I might be confusing it because they both look like sad sacks of mayonnaise. Rushbo was married 3 times, I think. Prager the same thing. Prager the same thing. I don't know if Prager's wife had cancer when he cheated on her. And it's the Family Values Party. Indeed. Indeed. But we might watch the Rush Limbaugh thing after the debate, because it's long. I don't know. It was Rush Limbaugh's wife on with Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck, I guess, wants to be the heir apparent to Rush Limbaugh. But also, so does Dan Bongino. So does Sean Hannity. Tones, glad you made it home safe. But speaking of right-wing talking heads that are hard to stomach, I guess I'll have to give you guys a content warning on this one. We're getting ready to see Tucker Carlson's face. He had Glenn Greenwald on. Why are there so many glaring doubts and holes in the Pelosi attack story? That is the chyron on Tucker Carlson. By the way, there aren't any glaring holes. The attacker has given his statement to the Department of Justice, and we have seen it. We've seen it. I also believe it's kind of like the QAnon shaman, Jacob Chamley, or whatever his fucking name is. Got really upset after he was, a true patriot for the cause, and then gets put in the clink, and they're all calling him Antifa. And he's like, I'm not Antifa. I did this for Trump. It's the same thing. Imagine this dude being so sold on the misinformation that he believes that he goes and attacks Nancy Pelosi's husband and then gets called a gay hippie communist by the right. It's hilarious.
So everybody feels, obviously, pain thinking of an 82-year-old man being hit with a hammer. It's like the worst thing imaginable. Well, it's quite common now. But why should the rest of us sit here and accept obvious inconsistencies in a story that has public policy implications and not say anything?
What? Huh?
We obviously shouldn't, and I think this is the most important point about all of this, which is how many millions of people have been conditioned to believe that it's immoral or even some kind of reflection of mental illness, like you're a conspiracy theorist, if you don't immediately and unquestionably accept whatever story is told to you by institutions of authority. And the amazing...
Glenn, I read the transcript of the attacker's words. That's not just automatically believing some story from an institution. I read what the attacker told the Department of Justice. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Thing about that, Tucker, is that this framework is being constructed by journalists, people whose primary purpose in life is supposed to be to question and challenge the claims of the powerful, and instead they're demonizing anybody who does so. Skepticism itself can never be wrong. Skepticism says there's evidentiary holes and there's faulty reasoning in what we're being told. Even if evidence does emerge later on to prove it, the skepticism itself was not just valid but necessary.
So Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. The Russians blew up their own pipeline. Julian Assange
good
is
evening.
a criminal. I mean, maybe we're in the habit of just accepting the most ludicrous possible claims and moving on to the next thing. It feels like where we are.
And he had to tie it back into the Russian thing.
I mean, I remember, Victoria Nuland, who's the State Department official in charge of Ukraine, went before Congress and said, we're really worried that the U.S. and Ukraine have biological labs that are very dangerous, and if they fall into the Russian hands, it can be a disaster. And anyone who said, wait, what does she mean, was instantly branded a conspiracy theorist. How many people were called conspiracy theorists because they question whether the vaccine works the way they were told to work or anything else? This is what they do, is demonize questioning.
And when I asked them where they got that the vaccine was 100% effective, do you know what I get? Every goddamn time from them. An episode of Rachel Maddow. Where in the same episode, I had to read the whole fucking transcript of the show to prove this guy wrong. Where in the same fucking episode, she even said they weren't 100% effective or used language. Just because, once she said it stops the virus in its tracks or whatever. That is always what I get from these people. Well, they were told the vaccine doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. What the fuck? Dude. I'm just, aghast at what is going on in our media. And I used to have the utmost respect for Glenn Greenwald. He used to be one of my favorite fucking journalists. What in the fuck happened to you, dude?
Dude, I think you were on that night. What, biolabs in Ukraine? Shut up, Putin apologist! What? Glenn Greenwald. Always do like a palate cleanser, the fresh air of sanity coming into the studio. Thank you very much.
I'm speechless. I'm speechless. I hadn't watched that clip. I knew I was in for something. I knew I was in for a ride with that one, but I wasn't expecting all that. How much fucking bullshit can you... That was a 2.5 minute segment. How much bullshit can you fit into 2.5 minutes? My God. Okay, so we're about 13 minutes away from the New Hampshire Senate debate. We're going to be watching Democratic incumbent Maggie Hassan. I can't say her name right. I can't say it right. Maggie Hassan? Maggie Hassan? We're going to be watching Democratic incumbent Maggie Hassan debate Republican nominee Doug Bullock. New Hampshire is a weird state in a very blue area where they have a very libertarian bent. Cicero, good evening. And you never heard of Glenn Greenwald? He's the founder of The Intercept. Oh, yeah! Revigal. I am so sorry, Revigal. I don't know exactly how to say your name, but if you will give me a phonetical pronunciation, I will totally get it right. Ravage, okay. Revigi. He's one of the founders of The Intercept, and a founder, not the... Okay, fair enough. He's one of the founders of The Intercept. He left a few years ago because they got upset. He got upset about them wanting to fact check his shit. Like, hey, we don't think this is right. Like the editor. Yeah, I'm from the U.S. As if you can't tell by the thick Appalachian accent. The Intercept is one of the best journalistic institutions we have, and the fact that they were able to get rid of Glenn Greenwald when he started being a dick. That's where you will get reporting from Ken Klippenstein. You'll get reporting from Ryan Grimm. Some of my favorite reporters. We're even going to be reading a very telling piece from The Intercept here after the debate. I have to also make a correction to my previous coverage. I really dismissed the idea of the Disinformation Governance Board being a tool of the Biden administration to try to censor people on social media. I really dismissed that as an out-of-pocket claim by right-wingers. We now have some fantastic reporting by The Intercept. But it's not necessarily the Biden administration. It's more what we would call the deep state, because this has been going on for fucking years. It was happening under the Trump administration.